Dad tried to sabotage my disabled-friendly house, claiming it's too weird and hinting my brother's kids are moving in soon. A few days ago, my dad came over to my house for the first time in quite a while. Since he last visited, I've made a ton of renovations. When we first moved in, the house was nice but didn't exactly fit our needs. I have a nervous system condition that, while I'm lucky to have mostly under control, can suddenly make basic tasks really difficult when I'm having a flare. Part of how I keep myself functional and avoid those debilitating crashes is by limiting activities that can bring one on. My husband's disabled too, he is hypermobile EDS, so we put our heads together and came up with a wish list of accommodations to make life easier for both of us. Some we tackled ourselves, and others we hired contractors for, but let me tell you, the results have been amazing. My crashes are less frequent, I have more energy, and my husband is over the moon about the difference it's made in his daily comfort and independence. But my father? He's not a fan. The moment he stepped in, I could feel his discomfort with every new feature. The lowered counters, the wide hallways, the grab rails. He thought it all made the house too weird. He seemed preoccupied with the idea of resale value, like we're planning to sell anytime soon, which we definitely aren't. His comments were relentless. I kept trying to steer the conversation to lighter topics, explaining, gently but firmly, that these changes were necessary for us, but he became more agitated than I'd ever seen him on something like this. The whole reason for his visit was to meet my foster dog, he's considering adopting him, and to take the dogs for a walk, then grab lunch. After our walk, I excused myself to use the bathroom. When I returned, I practically froze in the kitchen doorway. My dad was in the middle of trying to pry out one of our adapted mechanisms from the wall. He hadn't actually destroyed the function, but the wall now had clear cosmetic damage that'd need repainting. Shock hit me like a truck. I absolutely lost it, my voice shot up and I shouted, "What the fuck are you doing, Dad? What's your problem?" His response? "I just wanted to see if it was removable. Sorry. It's just too weird. It's just not going to work when Billy and Bobby move in with you." My jaw nearly hit the floor. Billy and Bobby are my nephews, my brother's children. The idea of them moving in with me was completely out of left field. I've never offered for them to stay with me, no one's ever asked, and if, heaven forbid, anything ever happened to my brother and sister-in-law, there are plenty of people ahead of me on any list to take them in. I pressed him, demanding to know what he was talking about, but he just waved me off, muttering for me to forget it. All he'd say was, "Well, honey, it's a massive house. You have room for 2 boys." When I made it clear I did not want my nephews even visiting for an extended time, let alone moving in, he clammed up again and refused to elaborate. He apologized immediately for damaging the kitchen and zelled me a sum larger than I'd need to fix the paint job, then insisted we stick to our original lunch plans. The rest of the day passed awkwardly. I didn't bring it up again, but the whole episode gnawed away at me. Days later, I still can't shake it. I'm furious about his lack of respect. He's never, ever harangued my brother over renovations or home decor, so it's hard not to feel like this is about my being a woman, about him seeing my home as less legitimate, less worthy of respect. And as for what he implied about my nephews, what the hell is going on? Is my family plotting something about the boys moving in with me? It wouldn't be the first time relatives assumed I'd take care of them, without asking me, but before it was just for babysitting, and I've since made it crystal clear to everyone that even that is off the table. I keep turning it over in my mind, not sure whether to confront my dad again or go straight to my brother. As far as I know, my brother isn't looking to move the boys out. Billy and Bobby are challenging kids, delayed, a bit entitled, and enabled by their parents. My brother's demanding job and my sister-in-law's struggles being alone with them have historically led to the family relying on others for childcare. When I lived with my dad, I got roped into that a lot, being the available young adult in the house despite not consenting to the arrangement. But I managed, eventually, to set some firm boundaries, and after a few standoffs, those were mostly respected. Still, the whole thing is so bizarre and out of pocket I can't wrap my mind around it. I don't want those boys living with me, and I can't imagine my brother would want it, either. Beyond everything else, it's a safety issue. I've had a stalker for years who, at one point, explicitly threatened to harm my nephews. That's when I started distancing myself from them, stopped picking them up from school, and, like clockwork, the threat stopped targeting them. I'm still pursuing legal action, but nothing is resolved yet, and the thought of Billy and Bobby staying under my roof terrifies me, not just because keeping them safe would be nearly impossible, but also because it could trigger some dangerous escalation. From every angle, it makes zero sense for anyone in my family to want those kids here. Even in some twisted family emergency scenario, my house would not be the answer. I honestly can't picture any situation that would justify that plan, and even if there were, it's not really my dad's concern. Unless he's way more of a chronic worrier than I thought, I just can't understand what he's thinking. For now, I'm just left with the queasy feeling that something's brewing behind my back, and I have no idea what to do about it. Update 1. I called my brother to talk about what had happened, and he was just as baffled as I was. He had no clue why our dad would ever suggest that Billy and Bobby, his boys, would need to move in with me. The way he sounded, I could hear his shock and genuine confusion come right through the phone. He insisted he'd never spoken to our dad about anything like that. I believed him instantly, it just made no sense that he'd want or need me to take his children in. Still, I pressed him, was there even the slightest reason Dad might think the boys would end up with me? Was Dad solving some imaginary crisis behind our backs? Was there an illness I didn't know about, or trouble in his marriage, or something else our dad might be trying to preempt? My brother was adamant, there's absolutely nothing like that going on. If anything were happening, I certainly wouldn't be the first, or even the fifth, person he'd turn to. He knows I run 2 businesses out of my house, and he wouldn't want to put that burden on me unless there were no other safe options for his kids. We talked it through, and even brought our eldest brother into the conversation. At the end of it, all of us were more than a little perplexed, because Dad isn't showing any other signs of slipping mentally. There's been nothing to suggest cognitive decline, no forgetfulness, no confusion, nothing. And yet, what he said was so bizarre and so out of nowhere, it's hard not to worry whether this could be the first subtle sign. My brother, Billy and Bobby's dad, is going to talk to Dad about this as soon as possible, try to get to the bottom of it, and see if there's any explanation at all. We'll figure out the next steps depending on what Dad says. Here's the sticking point, though, our father, as much as we love him, has always been a bit of a schemer and a notorious manipulator. He doesn't mean harm, usually he thinks he's helping, but he gets fixated on things, possibly his OCD at play, and will then try whatever means necessary to make sure what he wants actually happens, even if it doesn't fit with anyone else's reality or needs. He's been known to make things up or maneuver situations to satisfy his own strange agenda. So now my brother and I are faced with this, we have to talk to Dad, and it's going to come down to asking whether he's genuinely confused or whether he's, well, just doing what he does, spinning tales and trying to get his way by any means necessary. Because that answer, whether this is a sign of something wrong with his mind, or just another manipulation, changes everything about how we respond. My brother has bravely volunteered to tackle this talk first, lucky him, but either way, we need to know if we should be worried about our father's health, or chalk it up as just another dad thing where the facts have nothing to do with reality but, luckily, his brain is still as sharp as ever. Update 2. Life has been coming at me hard lately, and I know it's been ages since this whole thing happened, but I finally have a moment to breathe and reflect. For anyone unfamiliar, my father's recent weird behavior sent my brothers and me into a tailspin, worried that something was seriously wrong with him. After reading some books, frantically phone calling each other, and spending way too much time worrying, I started digging for answers. Multiple conversations with my dad, plus tactical debriefings with my brothers after their separate attempts, painted a clearer picture. It came down to a simple ultimatum. We finally told our father, if you're not upfront with us about what's actually going on, we're taking you to see a doctor, and we're not letting this go like we've always dropped every uncomfortable thing in this family. That finally made him confess, and everything clicked into place. First and foremost, my dad doesn't have dementia, Alzheimer's, or anything of that kind. At most, he's maybe showing a smidge more of his usual nonsense, possibly just a slight cognitive slip that comes with age. In reality, he's always been a manipulator and, honestly, thinks he's much slicker than he is. The only difference now is that he's finally not getting away with it like he used to when we were younger. So, I don't actually think this episode had much to do with age, it was all situational. Here's what I pieced together. After I moved out of my dad's house, leaving behind an empty bedroom and an office, even though there was already a designated guest room for the grandkids, my sister-in-law became obsessed with the idea that my nephews should start living with my dad during summers and school breaks. I knew she'd floated this idea before, but I had no idea how relentless she'd become, because it all went down after I moved out. The thing is, my dad lives just 15 minutes away from my brother and sister-in-law, so it's not like the kids would be enjoying some magical new location summer. She just wanted them out of her house for the summer, plain and simple. My nephews were immediately ecstatic at the idea. Grandpa's house is a free-for-all, no rules, no bedtimes or limits on sweets, no one checking if they brushed their teeth or even showered, and no supervision when they made messes or did dumb things. Complete chaos, and of course, to kids, that sounds like heaven. When their mom asked them, "Do you want to spend the summer at Grandpa's? Do you want to go ask Grandpa if he'll let you stay the summer with him?" They absolutely lost their minds. My dad clearly felt trapped between saying yes and disappointing his grandsons. And my father, for as long as I can remember, hates saying no to family, because if he starts, then suddenly people might start saying no to him, and that's the last thing he wants. So of course he agreed. Last summer, he actually said yes to this setup. He even had help from a babysitter, but she quit halfway through, and knowing my dad, I can guess if it wasn't that he made her uncomfortable, it was that the kids were so privileged and wild she hit her limit. Even with all that, it absolutely wore him out. He was exhausted and miserable. Yet couldn't bring himself to admit he couldn't keep up. He'd never admit he was too old or didn't have the energy. It's all about being the hero, being the energetic patriarch. My father is addicted to being the family hero, the one everyone needs, and he is obsessed with defying age, wanting everyone to see him as anything but an old man. My dad built himself a psychological prison, terrified of admitting limits because he never wants anyone to have boundaries, but now, it's backfiring. He simply can't say no, and now, he can't handle the consequences. He concocted this plan to pawn the kids off on me next summer. He was going to agree to have them and then shift them over to my place in what he described as easing into a smooth transition from his house to mine. If I know my dad, and I absolutely do, his plan was to beg me to take the kids for just a day, drop them off with overnight bags and play innocent. Didn't you say they could sleep over? Then, with a million excuses, stretch their stay at my place longer and longer until the whole summer slipped by. The kicker? He'd already floated this idea to my sister-in-law, who said yes without ever actually talking to me about it. Not a word, not even while my brothers and I were in panic mode trying to figure out what Dad was scheming. She only admitted this once my dad finally confessed everything. The wildest part, she stood there silently as everyone wondered if Dad was losing it, never revealing she was, and on his plan to dump her kids on me. When I asked her, "Did you not think to confirm this with me?" She insisted she remembered talking to me about it. Not even close, I would never have agreed to that. Now my brother's fuming at his wife. He's already incredibly involved as a dad, and he's sick of how much she relies on outsourcing the kids when they have paid childcare, too. Meanwhile, we're all out of patience with my father's ridiculous manipulations. I'm in my 30s, my older brothers are nearing 50, and still, he's scheming like we're a pack of squabbling kids he must manage to hold the family together. What's insane is my siblings and I weren't even children at the same time, but he's desperate to maintain his illusion of control and his precious status quo. It's maddening and so foolish. My own life has been packed with good things that truly deserved my presence and hard things that needed my energy. Instead, I found myself torn, focus yanked away and worry spiraling because I thought my father was suffering from neurological decline. Instead, it was just decades-old family drama, wrapped in new packaging, but the same old patterns repeating. My father's relentless need for control and refusal to let anyone set boundaries, spinning out in ways that forced all of us to finally hold up a mirror and say, "Not this time." When I was in my early 20s and my brother was in his mid-40s, our dad managed to create a rift between us that took years to repair, all because he refused to be direct with either of us. He wanted my brother to work more, and he thought it would be easier if I picked up my brother's kids from school each day. Instead of just telling each of us what he hoped for, he orchestrated this convoluted, secretive version of telephone, playing us off each other until it ended with us absolutely despising one another, both of us feeling insulted and misunderstood. It wasn't until years later that we pieced together what really happened. My brother is actually a devoted and incredibly active father, and on top of that, they already pay for childcare every day. The real issue is my sister-in-law. She's on a relentless mission to keep her children away from her, recruiting anyone and everyone, family included, to take them at every opportunity. It boggles my mind. She acts as if a single week in her own house with her own kids, even with their daily childcare in place, will somehow destroy her sanity. I understand my brother's frustration. Every time he turns around, she's made another arrangement for the kids to be gone as long as possible. At the slightest mention of snow, she'll rush the kids to relatives' houses on purpose, so they get snowed in. When COVID broke out, she went into a kind of panic mode, racing her kids across state lines to her parents' house and hurrying back home, just to ensure that if there were a lockdown, she would be stuck kid-free. She flatly refuses to be alone with her children and is always scheming to send them off somewhere far from her. It's never really been my place to say, but honestly, I am appalled at how hard she pushes for the kids to stay with our dad. It seems reckless, given that he's essentially passed his own damaged relationship with food right onto my nephews. He's a severely obese man with a serious junk food addiction, and it shows in how the boys eat. They were flagged as extremely overweight by the time they hit 9, despite being active. It's only gotten worse since then. They sneak and hide food, rack up absurd lunch debts at school. It's never about money, just how much they're buying and eating, and binge until they get sick. I cannot for the life of me understand why she prioritizes having her kids out of her house over staying home and working to repair their relationship with food. Both my brother and I suffered from deeply damaging restrictive eating disorders due to the warped messages about eating we absorbed from our dad when we were growing up. Those struggles landed us both in the hospital more than once. My brother is almost 50 and still battles relapses into bulimia, and it horrifies me to see the cycle continuing with another generation. When my sister-in-law tried to apologize, she offered to bring the kids over for a fun day at my house as a peace gesture. I told her outright that her actions had made me unwilling to have the kids over any time in the near future. She was livid, but I couldn't bring myself to care. My brothers and I had just spent so much time dealing with the fallout from this nonsense, all over our dad's pride and his endless habit of deciding what's best for everyone else, never himself. I'm just exhausted by it, but more than anything, grateful to have clarity now, and grateful for those rare people who help you see things for what they really are when your head is spinning. Update 3. I thought we'd finally reached equilibrium, ugly, exhausting equilibrium, but apparently the universe heard that and said, bet. Out of nowhere, the school nurse called me in the middle of a client meeting to ask if I was comfortable authorizing an antibiotic for Bobby because as the designated summer guardian, you're on file for medical decisions June through August. I sat there with my mouth open so long she asked if the call had dropped. Summer guardian? Where? For who? I told her calmly that I was not, under any circumstances, their guardian now or in the summer, and she read it back to me like I'd misheard. My full name, my address, my phone number, and an uploaded form titled Caregiver Authorization. I asked her to email it to me. She did. It had my name typed in, my address correct to the comma, and a scrawled signature that was not mine, not even close. No notary seal, just my sister-in-law's neat swoop at the bottom where it said parent/legal guardian. The date? Last week. I could feel my pulse in my temples. I forwarded it to my brother and called him. He picked up on the first ring and said, without hello, I did not sign anything. I did not know about this. He was furious in that quiet way he gets that makes you think of earthquakes before they crack the ground. Within an hour, I had the pediatrician's office calling too because their portal suddenly listed me as a contact authorized to consent for treatment during extended stays, and a camp coordinator I have never met. Apparently my nephews are enrolled in a day camp near my dad's house. Left a chirpy voicemail, thanking me for agreeing to step in as summer guardian if grandpa needed a break. I spent the afternoon on the phone walking people through remove me from your system like it was my part-time job. Every person I spoke to put notes on my file. Every person sounded a little incredulous when I said, I did not consent to this. My brother confronted his wife that evening. He called me from the driveway, voice ragged, to say she admitted she submitted the school form and gave my info to the pediatrician and the camp. Her excuse? She thought we were all on the same page after last year, and when he pointed out no one had spoken to me, she pulled the same line she fed me before. She remembered a conversation that never happened. When he pressed, it shifted to tears and you don't understand, I need a break, and then, the cherry on top, an admission that she had prepaid for a 3-week wellness retreat starting in June that can't be refunded. She had planned to drop the boys with my dad, hop on a plane, and let the smooth transition work itself out. I told my brother I wanted an email from her revoking everything she'd filed with my name on it, sent to the school, the pediatrician, the camp, and me, and I wanted proof it was done. He didn't argue. He sent me the revocations as they went out that night and the confirmation replies that followed. I saved all of it. I also sent my own letter, short and extremely unambiguous, to those same places. I am not an authorized caregiver now or in the future. Do not allow anyone to add me without a signed, notarized consent from me personally. It felt surreal typing that about my own family, but the relief when those acknowledgments rolled in made my shoulders drop a full inch. Apparently, that should have been the end. Predictable news, it wasn't. The next morning, my doorbell rang while I was still in pajamas, dogs going ballistic. On the porch, my father, sheepish smile, 2 duffel bags, and behind him, my nephews practically vibrating with the thrill of a forbidden sleepover. He opened with, hey honey, crisis, plumber's coming, they shut my water off, can you take the boys just for today? Maybe one night? It felt like a scripted line, the kind that only ever airs when the cameras are rolling. I stepped out onto the porch and closed the door behind me so the dogs wouldn't bolt. I told him no. I told him we already went through this. I told him, very plainly, you need to turn around and take them home. He tried everything. He put a hand to his lower back and winced. He joked about my giant house with the circus hallways that could swallow 2 skinny boys and not even notice. He called me sweetheart like I was 5. He gestured toward the driveway and said his water was literally off. What was he supposed to do if they needed the bathroom? He said he'd just run errands and be back in an hour, already inching the bags closer to my welcome mat. When he tried to nudge past me, I put my palm flat on the door and said his full name, the way you say it to a toddler about to stick a fork in an outlet. Then I said, if you leave these kids here without their parents' consent and without my consent, I'm calling the police. I hated that I had to say it in front of my nephews. Their faces fell. Bobby tried to hand me a bag anyway. Billy said, Grandpa said we could stay, like the words alone might make it true. I crouched down, told them I loved them and that I couldn't have them over today. I promised them it wasn't their fault. I told them to ask their dad about a park this weekend and I'd meet them there with the dogs. I walked my father back to his car while calling my brother on speaker. He answered, heard the scene, and said, do not move, like he was talking to a crime in progress. He arrived 12 minutes later in work slacks and running shoes, took his son's hands, told my father in a tone I've only heard once before in my life that this was done, and drove away without looking back. What followed was a week of fallout that felt like a family history seminar taught in the world's worst classroom. My father tried to reframe it as a miscommunication until I sent him a photo of the forged caregiver form. He spluttered and said he didn't know about the school but that he assumed I'd said yes when everyone else had. He didn't apologize. He called me sensitive. He said I should be nicer to my nephews. I told him I would not have this conversation if he couldn't say the words I will not do that again. He said them, finally, but it was like pulling a rusty nail from a plank. My sister-in-law? She doubled down. She sent me a text that started with I'm sorry you took it this way and ended with it's sad that your disabilities make you so rigid, which I read twice because it was so ugly I thought I hallucinated it. I blocked her number for 3 days, because if I responded in that moment I'd say something I couldn't unsay. She toggled to email and told me the retreat deposit was non-refundable and begged me to reconsider just for the first week so she could reset. My brother CC'd me on his reply, a single sentence telling her to cancel her trip and that he would not allow her to involve me or our dad again. She wrote back a novel about her mental health. He wrote back the name of a therapist and a note saying he'd already scheduled a consult for a different childcare arrangement for summer. I didn't know whether to cry or clap. I took one more step I'd been avoiding because it felt like admitting something was broken beyond repair. I called a locksmith. I hadn't given my father a key to this house, but he's the kind of man who has keys he never should have, and I wanted the comfort of knowing that even if he found a way to get one, it wouldn't help him. I also sent him, and this made my stomach flip, an email that said, in writing, that unannounced visits would result in me not answering the door, that drop-offs would be refused, and that any attempt to leave the children with me against my will would mean a call to the police. He didn't respond. He did, 2 days later, mail me a check with paint/lock/change for peace of mind, scribbled on the memo line. I didn't cash it. As if all of that wasn't enough chaos, the part of my life that has been the quiet, humming background danger for years decided to get loud again. A letter arrived in my P.O. box from my stalker. My attorney forwards everything to me after he opens it, referencing my dad's street by name and something about summer traditions. The timing was too on the nose to ignore. I sent a scan to my brother, and to my father, with a single sentence: "This is why I am not your childcare plan." My dad called me within 5 minutes, breathless, to ask if I was safe. For a second, the fog lifted and I had the father I wish he could be all the time. He promised me he understood. He promised me he would never do anything like that again. He even said he was going to tell the boys himself that they wouldn't be staying at his house all summer and that it was his decision. I didn't say I'll believe it when I see it. I just said, thank you. If there's a bright spot, it's this: my brother and I are more aligned than we've been in years. He put new pickup restrictions on the boys' school records so no one, not even our dad, can change their authorized contacts without both parents present at the office with ID. He's rejiggered his summer so the boys will be at day camp near their own house, with an actual, vetted aftercare plan that doesn't hinge on any relative's ego or exhaustion. He asked me to meet him and the kids at the park like I promised, and we did, and it was fun. We threw a tennis ball for the dogs until sunset. We didn't talk about any of it in front of them. We just existed together, all of us, with nothing being demanded of anyone. I keep thinking about the way my dad stood on my porch with those duffel bags and how small he looked when my brother said no. I'm not naive enough to think 1 week of consequences will undo a lifetime of patterns, but for the first time, I feel like we are not orbiting his gravity. He can pitch whatever story he wants, we don't have to climb aboard. And if he shows up again with a crisis and a pair of overnight bags? He already knows what will happen. So do I update 4. First it was the school again, not with a frantic nurse this time but a very polite voicemail asking for both custodial parents and you, since your name was used, to meet with the principal about documentation irregularities. I called my brother and told him if I had to sit on a tiny chair in a classroom as an adult, he was coming too. He was already on it. We sat across from the principal and the school resource officer at a laminate table that still had glitter embedded in the surface, from some long ago art project. The principal slid a folder to us with the forged caregiver form on top, my name, my address, the stranger hand that had tried to be my signature like a child copying cursive off a cereal box. Behind it were emails to the pediatrician and the camp, printed and highlighted. The officer didn't mince words. "This is not a slap on the wrist thing," he said. "We're not here to set anyone on fire today, but this is fraud. If it happens again, there will be a report and it won't be optional." The principal wanted a clear boundary in place so her staff didn't get put in the middle again. She asked us to sign updated authorization forms in person, notarized in the office, that explicitly excluded anyone else from being added without both parents standing there with photo IDs. I signed nothing except a statement that I would not be an emergency contact, not now, not summer, not ever, and that any document with my name would need my actual pen on paper. We walked out with copies. My brother didn't say a word until we were in the parking lot and then he said, "Horse, I didn't realize how much of a mess it had become until I saw it stapled." He took the folder, said he'd handle whatever came next with his wife, and for once, I didn't feel like I was about to be triangulated into the middle of it. I felt like air. That feeling lasted 4 hours. At almost midnight, my phone lit up with my father's name. I let it ring once on purpose so I could take a breath and answer without the edge that wants to clip the ends off my words. He started with a joke he must have thought would make it easier. "Your old man took a little slip and slide in the shower. 10 out of 10, don't recommend," but his voice was too bright around it. He'd fallen trying to pivot out of the tub and done something unpleasant to his shoulder. X-ray was clean, urgent care gave him a sling and admonitions, and he was calling me from his car in the parking lot because, he admitted in a breath that sounded like he'd set it down after carrying it for years, "Those bars you have, the ones I called weird. I think I need those." He actually said it. I sat there on the edge of my bed, pinching the bridge of my nose, and said, "Okay. We can do this without falling into your pride hole." I gave him the number for my contractor and, because I know how my father operates when his ego is bleeding, I texted my contractor at the same time and said, "Please put this behind whatever emergency you have. He will tell you it's not urgent and then he will fall again." They showed up the next morning, took one look at his bathroom, and I heard through the phone the particular tone tradespeople use when they discover a crime scene of DIY. "Who installed this?" My father muttered that the house came that way, which, sure. They anchored the grab bars into studs, put a handheld shower on a slider, set in a proper bench. He called me that night to say, in a voice that was an apology without the word, "I didn't realize how much I was bracing when I moved." I didn't know I could feel steady. He also told me he ordered the same model of lever handles we have in our kitchen, and yes, he said it like a man confessing he enjoys a cardigan. There was a second surprise tucked in that phone call, a chime from my email. My attorney had forwarded me the latest from the creep who has been the perpetual baseline under my life, a scanned letter, same dead-ad looping script, this time with a line a hair too precious to be coincidence. See you around the block on Maple this summer. My father heard me go quiet as the image loaded. I told him what it said. He took a sharp breath, not the theatrical inhale he uses when he intends to perform concern, but the involuntary kind you make when you see a car swerve in your lane. He said, "Give me the list," and for once he didn't argue when I did. He put cameras on his front and back doors the next day, added a floodlight on the side yard, and without making it a whole opera, texted my brother and me access and asked us to set the alert settings how we wanted. He also called his manager and moved his schedule so he'd be home by dusk all week. He asked me to send him the contact info for my attorney, and then, later, he texted a screenshot of an email to his HOA asking them not to publish his house number on any community roster. "I should have done this sooner," he wrote, and then, almost sheepishly, "Your bars make the tile look nicer, don't tell me why, just say yes." I said yes. Meanwhile, the wellness retreat did not go quietly into the night. The day after the school meeting, my brother called me from his garage, the echo making his voice sound like it was coming from the bottom of a well. His wife had tried to change tack, not drop and dash at my porch, not dump them at our father's and skid to the airport, but a softer version. Take the boys for just the first week and then grandpa will do the rest, leaning on the part of him that wants to make the people he loves stop crying. He didn't bend. She went anyway. She left for the airport with a suitcase that made a noise on the stairs like a verdict. He let her go. He called the camp near their house, confirmed the boys' enrollment, and then walked into the boys' room with a map and a marker and drew a line from their house to the camp. "This," he told them, "is our summer." They pouted, sure. They're children. But he held, and when she texted him from the gate, he sent back a photo of their sons eating breakfast at their own kitchen table. He also, for whatever mix of love and legal instinct woke up in him this week, called a family lawyer and booked an appointment, not because he's filing for anything yet, but because he wants a list in his back pocket of what he can do if she tries to unilaterally put the kids in a car again and head for the nearest relative. If this is what alignment looks like, quiet, resolute, no monologues, then I'll take it. Here is the part that still feels surreal even as I type it. My father did something on our father. He went to the boys' house after work, sat them on the couch, and told them himself that they would not be staying at his place for weeks at a time anymore. He said it was his decision. He didn't blame me. He didn't say my name. He didn't make me into the brittle ant with a stone for a heart. He said, simply, "I am too tired to be the fun camp where no one sleeps. You can come over for dinner, you can come on a Sunday and we'll watch a movie, but you live at home." Billy cried. Bobby asked if this meant he could still raid the freezer for ice cream on Sundays. My father said yes to the ice cream and no to the sleepovers. When he told me about it later, there was a catch in his voice I didn't recognize. It sounded like grief, and I had to sit with that for a minute. He is addicted to being the hero, but at the core of that addict is a man who truly loves his grandsons, and letting go of the story where he is the indispensable summer savior hurt him even as it freed the rest of us. The cameras paid for themselves in psychic relief within 48 hours. We were at my dad's house in the afternoon while the contractor finished in the bathroom, me on the couch with a dog snoring into my shins, my brother at the table with a sheaf of camp forms, my father pretending not to read the installation manual for his new shower seat, when my phone pinged. The side yard camera caught a car rolling past very slowly, then again 5 minutes later, slower, the passenger window cracked. We watched a still frame of an elbow we didn't recognize, a patch of a decal that was the wrong sports team for our neighborhood, a license plate half in shadow. My brother stood up like someone had flipped a switch in his spine. He went outside, not to do something macho, but to make noise, started the leaf blower, of all things, the suburban equivalent of church bells. My father called the non-emergency line, gave them the plate numbers as the car passed for the third time, and when the car didn't come back, he sat down and put his face in his hands. He didn't make a speech. He didn't call me sweetheart and urge me to let it go. He looked up and said, "I hate that you've been carrying this." It didn't fix anything. But the weight shifted, and that counts. In the small slice of life that isn't crisis management, there were things that felt like ordinary people doing ordinary things. My husband and I made a simple dinner and ate it at the island with our ridiculous lowered counters, and I thought about how something that was too weird for my father 3 months ago is apparently now fine enough for him to ask which finish we picked so he could match. A neighbor tripped on our walkway and grabbed one of the rails as she went down and didn't break her wrist, and she hugged me in our driveway like the rail had been a person who caught her. My brother texted me a photo of the boys in camp t-shirts that looked like they were designed by someone who has never seen color theory, and after camp he met me at the park with them like I promised and we watched them try to teach my dog how to go down the slide. It was absurd and perfect, and no one tried to hand me a duffel bag. I'm not pretending that years of learned behavior evaporate because we got through 2 weeks without a kidnapping by euphemism. I still have the email drafted in my head if my father shows up with a new crisis and a charming smile. My locks are still new. My attorney is still CC'd on things that make my stomach turn. But there is a different shape to the days. The axis has tilted a few degrees. My father is still my father, but for the first time in a long time, he's not the gravity everything else has to slingshot around. He can knock on my door and admire the circus hallways, and we can both know that admiring is the end of it. And if anyone tries to swivel me back into the old script, forms forged, just for a night, hero music swelling, I have the line and the muscle memory to say it. No.